questions on that? It is a risk. Oops, sorry. And the last one is bad advice, fraud, or theft, and I'll show you a video on this. You know, I think everyone around this table is a trustworthy source of information, and that you give good advice to your clients. Not everybody is like that. Bernie Madoff is the classic example of someone who engendered the trust of hundreds of thousands of people and lost many millions of dollars cheating them out of their wealth. I think it's always good if somebody gives you a course of action that might not feel comfortable, to get a second opinion. Go to another financial advisor, go to another financial planner, go to another lawyer, go to another accountant. If something is not sitting right with you, or even if you don't understand it, it's always good to get a second opinion on these things. Maybe you have to pay for it, it's worth it. Another bit of advice that I like to give to my clients is, while I specialize in creating complex structures for my really wealthy clients, I find that it's very difficult to get them to understand what we're doing. It is extremely difficult. So if it's so difficult that they don't understand what we're doing, or they can't feel comfortable following the process that we're building for them to keep it in place, then don't do it. Keep it simple. Maybe you pay more taxes in the end. That is a risk, but maybe it's worth it.
I would just add to that, I can't tell you how many clients have come to me after the death of a spouse or death of a parent who had set up trusts, revocable trusts, not put everything into it, or didn't understand what they were doing. That after death, that suddenly they're faced with a trust that they didn't understand, and now they're having to deal with a separate tax filing, additional assets, beneficiaries that they hadn't looked at in 20 years. It's a huge problem.
So to take that to one of the extremes, we have a lot of clients, and we do revocable trusts for all our clients, because we try to avoid probate. That's the main reason we do it, and then also planning for incapacity. But if you don't get these trusts updated periodically, and you don't go back and rethink what you did 2 and 5 and 10 years ago, you're making a mistake. 1, the tax laws may have changed. 2, the laws may have changed. But 3, your beneficiaries may have changed. They may be different people. They may be in different circumstances. You may be in different circumstances. You may have more assets. You may have less assets. So here's a classic example of where you need to get your clients in to see us to change their documents. Before 2010, we had the estate tax exemption that rose from 2001 to 2010 from $1 million a person up to $3.5 million a person. So if they were married, it was $2 million or $7 million a person was exempt from the estate tax. In 2010, the estate tax disappeared, and then we came up with a higher exemption today. In most old revocable trusts that I have seen, and wills, they would create what's called a fractional formula. And a fractional formula, what they would do is they would say, first, put the assets into the exempt trust so that it doesn't get subject to estate tax either at the death of the first spouse or the death of the second spouse. Then the exemptions increased. And today, in 2018, they're going to be $5.6 million per person. The exemptions just went up. So that's $11.2 million of wealth that if you do not exceed that threshold, there will never be an estate tax. Well, if you put all of your assets on the death of the first spouse in one of these exempt trusts, you don't have to worry about the estate tax. But you also forego one of the main benefits that the tax law allows. When you die, any assets that are not in this exempt trust, that might be in your spouse's estate or in a trust for your spouse, get stepped up to fair market value. So if there's been appreciation in that exempt trust between the death of the first spouse and the death of the second spouse, you don't get credit for that. So if you automatically are forcing assets into the exempt trust, you don't get the step up in basis on the death of the second spouse. And so you're going to have capital gains if you want to liquidate any of those assets in that exempt trust. Well, there are ways around that. We are actually amending these revocable trusts because Virginia statute allows you to do that. There's something called a non-judicial settlement agreement that you can enter into. There's also a new decanting statute that was just enacted that overturns the old decanting statute that was enacted about 5 years ago. And the new decanting statute makes it easier to do these types of things, to shift it from one of these trusts where you can't get a step up in basis to a trust where you can. There are other techniques that we use to accomplish that.
Well, I have a client.
And we need to consider that for our clients. We need to consider that for our clients so that they are, let me just finish, if they have the assets in one of these exempt credit shelter family trusts and they're stuck in there and the estate is under the $11.2 million and probably will not exceed that, then we want to think about reforming that exempt trust. On the other hand, if the assets are way above the $11.2 million, then using this fractional formula does make sense. Go ahead.
I have a client in that category right now.
I've got about 50 clients in that category.
Well,
at least.
I don't, but I wish I did. But
No, it's just-
I've been
it's
telling
work
him that one of the trade-offs, he says he keeps worrying about the estate tax is going to be gone.
Mhm.
And I told him, I said, well, yeah, and the concern I have is the stepped up in basis might be gone with it. And
We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen.
Right, we don't know, but my point
so-
is, how do you address that?
So what you do in today's documents, what you should be doing, or what your lawyer should be doing, is anticipating repeal, no repeal. Anticipating basis step up, limited, no basis step up. Build it into as an alternative structure in the document. This happened in 2010, okay? For any of you that had clients that died in 2010, George Steinbrenner died in 2010. John Kluge, who owned Fox, died in 2010. And another Texas oil billionaire with over $22 billion in assets died in 2010. And in 2010, the way the law worked at that time was you got a limited basis step up, maximum of $4.3 million if you were married. That's it. So if you had $20 billion in your estate, then about $20 billion did not get a basis step up. So the New York Yankees are held by trusts for the benefit of the Steinbrenner family that will never sell that because there's no basis step up. And George Steinbrenner's tax basis in the Yankees was nothing compared to what it's worth today. Probably what it'll be worth after the World Series. So, yeah, I mean, and some people are fretting that they'll do completely away with basis step up. Others are also prognosticating that if they enact what is being done in Canada, it could be even worse. In Canada, when you die, if you own an asset, you do get a basis step up, but you have to pay capital gains at death. So there's capital gains tax. Ouch. That's 20% plus 5.75% for Virginia, if you're in Virginia, plus 3.8% net investment income tax, minus deductions that you probably won't be able to use. So there is the possibility that the repeal of the estate tax could actually adversely affect 99.75% of the U.S. population by disallowing this basis step up. Because 99.75% of the population is below that $11.2 million threshold. So we'll see what happens. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that we're going to see estate tax repeal. There's nothing we can do to protect from the risk of fraud except try to seek second opinions and try to give the best advice we can to our clients. I mean, I have a few clients that were affected by the Madoff crisis. I have others that had friends, and my mother down in Florida has relationships with people. They lost significant wealth in that crisis. One way to protect yourself is not put all your eggs in one basket, that's for sure.